Good afternoon, Pazi here, Office of Highway Maintenance. Good afternoon, this is Pazi, Office of Highway Maintenance.
Hi, welcome. We're just about to get started with our presenter, Charles.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Corey. How's everybody doing today? Like Corey said, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. My name is Charles Taylor. I have a background in political direction, community engagement, canvassing, et cetera. And so, I would say that where I sit is at the intersection of political data and community organizing. And so, as recent, I have done a lot of organizing and like political data targeting voters, that kind of thing for different candidates in Mississippi and a few across the South. And so today what I wanted to talk to you about was authentic community engagement. I would say my days of an organizer started probably when I was in middle school, when I was, seeing things that was happening in my school and thought, oh, this is not right. Let me talk to my other students about this and see how they feel and see if it's a shared experience. And then going on to maybe talking to a teacher or a principal about the same thing. And so, I'm excited to share this with you, and I'll go ahead and share my screen and make sure everybody can see this. I wanted to make sure, Corey, you can give me a thumbs up. You can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Great. And so one thing I wanted to talk to you about was authentic community engagement. And so as we think about authentic community engagement, you think about it, how to center, you're centering where we are. And so, with Safe Routes to School, you have the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School. Those 6 E's are equity, ensuring that Safe Routes to Schools initiatives are benefiting from all demographic groups with particular attention to ensuring safety, healthy, and fair outcomes for low-income students, students of color, students of all gender, students with disabilities, and others. And then, of course, we have engineering, creating physical improvements to streets, neighborhoods that make walking and bicycling safer, more comfortable, and more convenient. Encouragement, generating enthusiasm and increasing walking, bicycling, for students through events, activities, programs, education, providing students and community with the skills to walk and bicycle safely, educating them about the benefits of walking and bicycling, and teaching them about broad range of transportation choices. And of course, we have evaluation, which is assessing which approaches are more or less successful, ensuring that the program initiatives are supported by equitable outcomes, and identifying unintended consequences or opportunities to improve the effectiveness of each approach. But today, we're here to talk about that first E, which is engagement. So all Safe Routes to School initiatives should begin listening to students, family, teachers, and school leaders, and work with existing community organizations and build intentional and ongoing engagement opportunities into their program structure. And so as we think about authentic community engagement, we're thinking about the word authentic. So a lot of times when we think about community engagement, we may think about it with the end in mind. And it's good to think about it with the end in mind. And we may have a particular vision to say, we want to have safe routes to school. It could be well intended, but if you don't have those who are affected the most with you, if your relationship with those individuals are transactional and not collaborative, then you have authentic community, you having a community engagement, but the authenticity of it may be a question. And there's no indictment to you or whoever may be coming up with the program, but it's just making sure that those who are affected the most are centered and at the table. When you think about people providing their engagement, or you think about folks who want being able to move something, the best way to do it is that all parties involved who want a positive impact to be able to feel ownership of it. It's just to give a working framework of what is authentic community engagement. So authentic community engagement is a partnership between the party and the community where the foundation of the relationship is trust. The community must have ownership, just like I mentioned, on every level of the relationship, and it solely must not be transactional. But one thing I want to talk to you about is that word trust. I want to stay there for a few seconds. And so, when you think about it, everything happens at a particular speed of trust. If you have a lot of trust, then things move quickly. If you have very little trust, then step by step, you're going to have a slow moving process. It may seem as if it's deliberate, but as you have this slow moving process, it may seem like sometimes a lot is going on, but you're moving in circles. And so the speed of trust is something that I want you to take away today. Is one of the things I want you to take away today is evaluate what is the speed of trust I have with different community members. What is the speed of trust I have? And this is something that can work whether it is a partnership, romantic or business or otherwise, a friendship, just two people that are acquainted with each other. The speed of trust is something that's really, really valuable. And I'll say this, as we have a speed of trust, there's also this sense of urgency. If we think about school children and we think about the impact of your programs, how it can not only save the school district money, and saving the school district money means that they can spend more direct dollars into the classroom, how this can be helpful to the environment, how having safe routes to school can really just ensure that the quality of education each child is provided is higher than that was maybe before. You also want to think about trust in it. And so sometimes it may take a moment to step back and say, let's make sure that we have a level of trust. Let's make sure that we have an understanding so that when we're moving, we can move very quickly. And if we ever have to have pause, folks understand and respect the intentions of each other. So I think speed of trust is something that's really important as you think about authentic community engagement. And so what I want to talk to you about today is organizing. As I would say, one of the most sophisticated ways to have authentic community engagement is to have an organizing framework. And so, organizing is truly the key to authentic community engagement. I want to talk to you about a particular organizing framework as is taught by Hollis Watkins. And so Hollis Watkins, and I'll play this short video so you can get to know who he is in this video. But Hollis is the founder of the organization in Mississippi called Southern Echo. He's no longer with that organization, but Hollis is a longtime organizer in Mississippi and throughout the South. He was the first member of SNCC in the state. And SNCC, for those who may not be aware, is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. These were the young people who were doing a lot of great work during the civil rights movement throughout Mississippi. Hollis is also a Mississippi, is a Freedom Summer veteran. And so talking a little bit about Freedom Summer happened in the summer of 1964. And the reason why Freedom Summer happened is because the year prior, in 1963, there was 3 civil rights workers that were slain in Mississippi in Neshoba County. And as they were searched for those 3 civil rights workers and finally found their remains, and unfortunately all 3 were murdered. There were two white gentlemen and an African-American gentleman. And so the students were upset. And they were asking themselves, what is there to do? We have to find justice. So there was a couple of things they decided. One, they decided that they wanted to have a summer where they could bring students from all over the country, from all backgrounds, from all races to Mississippi. And secondly, they wanted to register as many African Americans to vote as they could. And as they were doing so, there were cameras that came down. And quite frankly, a lot of these cameras came down to bring national attention to Mississippi. because it was a coalition of Black and white students from all over who were trying to make a difference in our country. And so as the cameras came down, they, in the frame of those students, they captured the brutality of what was happening in Mississippi. And so I'll come back to that. So I want you to think about Freedom Summer, because there's a story I want to tell about Hollis and really figuring out what does he understood when he was having his own troubles. How can, if you engage with community authentically, it can actually, I'll say, provide you the keys that you need. And so this is just a 3-minute video, and I thought it was divine. As I was trying to find a snapshot of Hollis, I found this video, and he's actually talking about his route to school and how he experienced it in the late 50s to early 60s in Mississippi.
When I was growing up as a child on the farm, my parents were sharecroppers. I had to walk to school while white children on the bus rode by, splashed mud, water on us. We couldn't ride the bus. We could not go to the same school they went to. The equipment, the books and everything that we had at the school were hand-me-down books. When they became obsolete for the white children, they were passed to us. I knew something was wrong with that. I didn't know exactly what. And I began to question people in general. I began to question God as to why he would allow such things to take place. As a part of that process, my father said to me once, he said, "Son, you always stand up for what is right, even if you're the only one standing." And I began to look and see all of the things that I felt was wrong that was going on. Then I said to myself, these are the things that I've got to fight against because they're not right. One day I saw a friend girl of mine, and she told me about what she thought was Dr. Martin Luther King in town doing voter registration classes, etc. So I got some friends of mine and we went out to see Dr. King, but we found Bob Moses. And he explained to me what was going on and asked if I would join. So I said I would, because I felt that the things that he was doing would lead me to getting answers about answers that I had not been able to get since. So that's what led me to this work. And I made a commitment that I would do everything I could, when I could, as long as I could, until we get these situations straightened out. They still haven't been straightened out. So I'm still trying to live up to my commitment. I never looked 50 years into the future. You know, back then, I never thought about how long it would take to do it, but naturally, I didn't think it would take this long, you know. And if I had, then I don't know whether I would have made the kind of commitment that I made, but I made that kind of commitment. And I was naive in terms of where we were and how long it would take to straighten things out. So I've just been taking it.
So thank y'all for indulging me. As we talked about his 4 principles, I wanted to find a way to bring him in the room, and so you can get a feel of who he is as a person. And so, he's been a mentor of mine for many years, mentor of Derek Johnson, who's the national president of NAACP, and several other folks in Mississippi. And so he's definitely leaving his footprint here. But one thing that I would say is that has something that's really going to live on in time, and there's a young picture of him back in the 60s, is his fundamental of organizing principles. And so Hollis has 4 fundamental organizing principles. The first is investigation, and we'll talk about these in depth. The second is an education. Thirdly, there's negotiation internally and externally. And finally, you have a demonstration step. And so, as we think about the investigation phase, I think it's profound that it's the first phase that we look at, because in the investigation phase, one must first identify the problem. So if the problem is, we must revamp, reevaluate, or create the problem is children need safer routes to school. And so, you may think about how you want to do that. Is it revamping a program? Is it evaluating a program? Is it creating one? But before you get there, the reason why I think the investigation phase is so important, and I think it ties and is interwoven when we talk about authentic community engagement, is because the first thing you must do is listen. Before you can say, I think here's the solution, you have to listen to those who are taking those routes. So you have to listen to the students who have walked to school every day, or the parents who have children walk to school or may walk with them, or bicycle, or people along the way that may not walk to school, may not be school age anymore, but have an impact or may have insights on how to help you design or redesign a program. And so, and you can do this by simply conducting listening tours. And these can be, small groups of 5, it can be large groups of 50 or more. And and the whole purpose of the meeting is simply to listen, to share with each other. You state what you all believe is a shared problem. And before you get to a shared vision, you have these shared listening sessions. And so then from this investigation stage, after you have listened, then you begin to look at research and best practice models based on the problem. So, what have people done in maybe a neighboring school district? What have people done, even around the world to address these things? And then also, is there some way that we can come up with a new ideas to a potential solution? And don't get me wrong, sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's just, applying what has already been done somewhere else, or just making tweaks to what you already have. But in order to look at the efficacy of that program, listening has to be something that is key, and it has to be the first step. And so as I go on to the second step, which is education, I did want to mention that the fundamental organizing principles go in that order: investigation, education, negotiation, demonstration. But as they go in that order, these things are always simultaneously happening. So it's not as if that you, at some point, you get to a point where you're satisfied with your investigation phase. Even in the education phase, you'll always be investigating to learn more. And so, with the education phase, is really about listening some more. You're conducting those listening tours, you're creating those shared learning experiences, and you're also disseminating your findings. So you say things like, we listened and here's what we heard. And so the whole point of this is you're not trying to find a solution yet. And that's why I say, and it's really important about that speed of trust, going back to that conversation. And as we think of speed of trust, think about it in the concept that you do a lot of work on the front end so that you can move quickly afterwards. And so, you begin to educate, and you say, hey, we have recognized that this is the problem. After gathering information, this is what people have been saying. And you ask almost as a check and balance. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are we framing this correctly? How should we talk about these things? And so this is the way that, like I said, at every step, if those who are affected the most are at center, that's the way to engage authentically. Digressing for a second, oftentimes we may see scenarios where folks have great intentions. They've done all the research, they've done the investigation, and then they get to a point where they say, hey, here's the program and we want your feedback. And so being in Mississippi, we had this thing called Mississippi Nice, where people will nod their head and say, oh, that's great, but then nothing happens. Other places, you may be met with much resistance. But ultimately, the flaw in that model is that you're asking for somebody to provide feedback to something. And someone's feedback is never going to be as powerful or as impactful as their collaboration on something. And so, you want to continuously welcome feedback from your education stage. And then thirdly, this one is really, really important. And that is your negotiations. And so, when you think about whatever the problem is, there's always internal negotiation and external negotiations. And so sometimes external negotiations can be framed in a sense of you may be dealing with a hostile situation, and at other times it may be a friendly external negotiation. I would argue that safe routes to schools for all parties would be something that would be a friendly conversation, but it's just about the tweaking and the making sure that everybody's on the same page. And so as you have your internal negotiation, you have to think about it this way. You gotta, just because you have a framework or a concept or a shared vision does not mean that you have a working model. So as you are in your insular group, you think about, or, what do we want? What is non-negotiable? Like, what is never going to be on the table when it comes to a safe route to school? And like I said, this doesn't have to be something that's hostile, but I think it has to be something that's stated explicitly. And so, and you also want to think about, what kind of deep investments do we want to make as we are negotiating with each other. So once a group of people, once community can come together and say, we have thought about this, we investigated the problem, we've educated a critical mass of folks in the community on the problem, and now since we have a shared vision, let's negotiate the terms of that shared vision. And it's like sometimes that language can sound so strict and stark, but what it really speaks to is making sure that you all are always going to be on the same page. You could easily walk into a meeting, easily develop a program, thinking that you all are on the same page, when it's like, wait a minute, we didn't think about this scenario. They came back to us with something that we didn't think about. And so that's why I say internal negotiation at every stage will always happen, ongoing. And so the second part of negotiation, is the external. So once you all have come up with a shared vision, you got it as a group, you figure out the working model you want to look at, you think about, what is it you want to display, and you want to be able to display it as a united front. And so, and that's why I'll go back to internal negotiations. That's why it's so important, because in those internal negotiations, one thing I didn't mention, but you're talking about, is what role that everyone will play in making sure that we have the income that we want. The outcome that we want in this situation. And so once again, I want to really, really reiterate something, and that is, you always must be clear about what is non-negotiable. And you need to be clear about that in the step 1 and step 2 as we talk about negotiation. But then the last thing is, know the position of the external partner fully. So if you're defining the external partner as the city or the legislator or the county, you want to know their position completely. Because sometimes you may ask for something and it may be far less than what they were willing to give. Or you could ask for something and there's this resistance there, and you're wondering, why are they resistant to this thing but then you realize, oh, because there's this competing interest here. And so then the reason why you want to know that is because as you think about what competing interests may be, you want to figure a way that you can satisfy all parties as much as possible, keeping in mind that you maintain the integrity of your non-negotiables. And so the last phase I would say is demonstration. And I want to be clear about what demonstration is. Demonstration just reminds us that there is an end in mind. And so, a lot of times when we talk about organizing and mobilizing and we use the word demonstration, we're talking about direct action, protesting, etc. This is not that. This is not that at all. This is making sure that we continue to know what our guiding star, what our North Star is. So if at the end, if you say we're trying to design a safe routes to school program, then your demonstration phase is to demonstrate that you have created that program. And the reason why this is so important, and sometimes, it seems like it's obvious, but we can get caught up in always investigating and always educating, and always negotiating back and forth, but then forget that the whole purpose of this was to develop something or was to demonstrate some action of some sort. And so the demonstration phase is the last phase, but it's also a phase I would say you want to think about it with your end in mind. And so one thing I wanted to talk about was kind of my experiences and thinking about trusted voices and having a speed of trust. And so there was a lady that I met named Emma Butler. I met her in 2014, and I'll never forget her. I'll never forget her name. And there's a picture of her on the left. And so Emma Butler, I was working on an initiative in Mississippi. It was an education ballot initiative that would have done two things if it was successful. The first, it would have fully funded education and made it a fundamental right in the state of Mississippi. Two, it would have provided for the triggering of the education funding mechanism in Mississippi, or the formula, so that the legislators were forced to fully fund education. As it stands in Mississippi now, we have a right to a free public education as is prescribed by the legislators. And prescribed by the legislators can have a lot of ambiguity in there, and it doesn't always serve the children, in my opinion. But as we're working on this initiative, like I said, very simple. It would have fully funded education in every school district, in every school in the state of Mississippi. I was, but for Mississippi, it's a citizen-driven amendment. So because of a citizen-driven amendment, you had to collect about 108,000 signatures from registered voters in Mississippi, and you had to do it evenly distributed between the 5 previous congressional districts. And so, we set out a goal of collecting about 200,000 signatures, and we were able to do that. It was my responsibility to collect about 40 to 50,000 signatures, doing so all with volunteers. And so I had a group of guys. We went up to Holmes County, Mississippi, Durant, well, Holmes County is the county, Durant, Mississippi. And it was an all-Black high school, and there was a graduation. High school had been underfunded severely since Jim Crow. And so, I'm thinking, getting signatures to fully fund education here would be like trying to take candy from a baby, or is the lowest hanging fruit. Oh, this should be so easy. I could just say fully fund education. Here it is. Folks are going to do it. But what ended up happening, we got there, we were talking to folks and said, hey, will you sign this petition to change the Constitution to fully fund education? And, folks were nice to us, but many of them declined. And so we were puzzled, and we were wondering, like, how is this? I mean, like, literally, we have the same shared vision. They want to fully fund education, and we want it too. what is the disconnection happening? And the disconnection that was happening is that although I was engaging community, I did not do so authentically. I laid out a plan for myself. I said, this is how we're going to do it. I looked at the data. The data told me that these folks would be completely receptive to it. And then I got there and was met with no thank you. And it wasn't until it was Emma Butler who came up to me. And she says, baby, what you doing? And I said, well, we're here for Initiative 42. We're trying to get these signatures signed. And she says, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I was just in a community meeting. No, I'm sorry, a meeting at the school district about that. And so unbeknownst to me, Miss Butler was actually the community liaison between the school district and the community, of course. And so as I talked to Miss Butler, she said, oh, so y'all need any help? I said, yes, ma'am. No one will sign this petition. And she said, oh yeah, they'll sign it. Well, let me talk to them. And so literally what happened was Ms. Butler started explaining to a few people, hey, you need to sign this petition. It's going to fully fund our schools. Very quick, boom. And so as she said that, we were like, wow, I just talked to this person for 5 minutes and they told me no. Ms. Butler was a trusted voice in their community as we began. And this is an example we were able to engage authentically quickly and pivot. They signed a petition. And so the conversation went from Ms. Butler explaining to people, maybe taking 30 seconds of what it is, to sign this, they'll tell you what it's about. Sign this, they'll tell you what it's about. Sign this, they'll tell you what it's about. And so not only were we able to collect all the signatures of the folks outside going into the graduation, then she went and spoke to the superintendent and said, hey, we need to sign it. We need to get these petitions signed. There was some folks they missed. Okay. And that was all that was said, because there was a particular speed of trust between Ms. Butler and the superintendent. So then we went back into it. They made an announcement at the school, made an announcement at the graduation. Hey, sign the petition. It's going to help fully fund education. These gentlemen are here to do so. And so I learned a lesson that day that I'll never forget. And that is, if you're trying to do something, you may have a shared vision, but the first step in order to move something is to engage authentically. And so Miss Emma Butler is someone I think about frequently, and she taught me a very quick life lesson, and a great one at that. And so saying all that to say, every community has an Emma Butler. Every community has several Emma Butlers. Sometimes their name is Emma Butler, and sometimes their name is something else. Sometimes the Emma Butler can come in several different packages. But if I did not engage with her, honestly, if she had not just run up to me and I would have missed her, then we would have left that graduation with maybe 5 or 10 signatures. Instead, I would argue probably 95% of the folks that were there signed that petition. And then there was even some folks that Miss Butler said, well, what's your sister doing? I know she lives around the corner. Tell her drive up and sign this. This is important. And they would say, okay, Miss Butler. And I would ask, who is Miss Butler? I asked a couple of folks there, and they said to me, oh, Miss Butler, she's the person we go to when it's about the school district. If you want to know about what's going on with the school district, you go talk to Miss Butler. She's there. And she, has been so, even though I think now at this point she doesn't have any children in the school district, but still it's her community and she cares about it. But, Ms. Butler may have not been the first person I would have thought to talk to. Saying that to say, everybody has their Emma Butler story. Hollis Watkins, who talking about his fundamentals of organizing principles, tells a similar story as he was trying to organize in Greenwood, Mississippi back in 1964. And so, telling Hollis' story quickly, they went around to the different churches and They were trying to get the pastors and the deacons, because that's the leadership of the church, to help them. And so as they were doing so, they found this little old lady. He was walking down the street feeling defeated because she is feeling defeated because the pastor of the church and the deacons told him, hey, no, you can't do that here. And so what happens, this little old lady is on a porch and she tells him, come here. And he goes and sit. And so she asks him, are you thirsty? And he said, yes. And then she gets some glass of lemonade or something like that. And then she says, now, what are y'all doing here? I said, well, we're trying to register African Americans to vote. I think it's important. We just need a place to meet. And she says, oh, that's great. You can use my church, or y'all should use my church. And he asked, what church is that? And she told him, and he was thinking, that's the church I just left. And they told me no. She says, well, come back around here around 12 o'clock tomorrow, and I'll have the keys for you. And so he said around 11:30, he was bouncing his basketball up and down the street, waiting to 12 o'clock hit. And as he gets 12 o'clock hits on the dot, he runs up to her house. She tells him, have a seat on the porch. And as he's talking to her, she reaches in her bag, pulls out the keys, and tells him, bring them back when you finish. And so, thinking about this, the pastor told him no, the deacon board told him no, but it was this little old lady who was very unassuming, was the one who gave him the keys to the church and allowed for that community meeting to happen. And so saying this to say, as you organize and as you engage authentically with community, doing so means engaging with everyone. And so, we were going to have a quick breakout session. Corey, I didn't know if you wanted to take a few minutes, if folks had thoughts or questions, or I yield to you.
Yeah, first, thank you so much, Charles. I really appreciate the historical framework and your organizing framework, and then the stories that you told were very inspiring and interesting, and I think relevant to all our work. So thank you for your expertise. I guess if people do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box for now, and I can go ahead and explain a bit about our breakout sessions for today. So we're going to break out into 6 groups, and each group will have one facilitator from Safe Routes Partnership who will guide us through the activity. And it'll be a nice, Charles gave us a nice introduction into what we will be doing. So we're going to spend some time thinking about who we engage within a Safe Routes to School context. So we're going to be in groups for about 15 minutes, and your facilitator will explain all of the instructions to you. We also have the breakout group slides that I can also put in the chat box, so you can have those as well, and your facilitators will also share them with you. So thank you, Cass. So the slides are in the chat box, and I'm going to go ahead and open up our breakout rooms. You'll be automatically moved into your session. Like I said, we'll be in breakout groups for about 15 minutes, and then we will gather back together as a full group, and your facilitator from Safe Routes will meet you inside the group. My group is group 5. I will be in a moment. If you don't see me, just hang tight, and I will see you all shortly, and then we'll come back together in about 15 minutes to do a group debrief. Thank you, everybody.